A guy came up to me the other night, right, and he was like, "Who is your favorite artist of all time?" He said, is it Shakespeare? Is it Frost, Picasso, Michelangelo? Is it the Beatles, Rembrandt, Michael Jackson, Beethoven? He went on and on about who he thought was the greatest, but not recognizing even in his infrastructure to answer that question was misled and outdated. And so finally I kindly smiled and said, "Okay, sir, you asked me who was the greatest artist of all time. Now you tried to share yours, now let me share mine." Because there is no debate about who is the greatest, because all those other artists you mentioned, yeah, the greatest, he made him. And see, this artist, he's a beast, a lion, the name above names. You don't even realize it, but you encounter his art every day. And see, he deserves all the acclaim, he deserves all the fame, because all other artists pass away, but he remains. Oh, by the way, his name is God, Yahweh, Creator, your Maker. He's infinitely creative, sir. There is no one greater. I can tell you look like you're starting to get mad at me, but don't get jealous because your favorite artist might bend words and my favorite artist bends galaxies. See, in the palm of his hand, he holds all the sand, the author of life when he whispered, "Let us make man." See, what if I told you that you are God's poetry? You were created because someone else was creative. See, long ago, he picked up his eternal paintbrush and he dipped it in his glory and he placed us in his story and said they would live for me. And I know it sounds outlandish, but we're not the product of random chances. In fact, we're not even the vine, we're actually the branches. In the same way, we're not the artist, we're actually the canvas. Because in an instant, God started to make art, shaped you uniquely and beautifully, individually from the start. And he touched the canvas of flesh and said, "This one is better than the rest. I'll give them so much of my image, even when they're hot off the press, you can still see the steam of my breath." And at about that time, the guy butted back in and said, "That sounds good and all, but I'm wretched and filthy. God won't use me, will he?" And I said, that's what's awesome about God. No matter what we've done, he can still use us. Even though other artists have broken equipment, they start to make excuses. God doesn't refuse us, and neither does he accuse us. Instead, he redeems us in Jesus and promises never to lose us. So stop saying that you're dirt. Stop saying you're the scum of the earth, because you ought to be careful about how you speak about someone else's work. Because if we trusted in Jesus, we can stop saying that we're filthy. All that is anyways is just pride, clothed in false humility. If we only believe that we were truthfully created in his likeness, then we'd stop saying that we're wretched, filthy, shameful, guilty, but instead knowing that we trust in Jesus, we're righteous. Don't you see we're drawn to repentance because of his kindness? So how dare you call yourself worthless when he says you're priceless? He's the one who gave Van Gogh the imagination to change the face of a painting. Tell me, who is responsible for Mozart being able to compose at the age of 5 without formal training? He made the fingers that Beethoven used to make art on the keys. For Pete's sake, he made Stevie Wonder one of the best musicians of our time, and he couldn't even see. And that's why, in the same way that our lives are borrowed time, this poem is borrowed lines. Because the most ridiculous thing we could ever say is that this poem is mine. And no, we're not self-sustaining, we're not self-creating. Technically, nothing we do is original, we're just imitating. And that's not a diss. All I'm trying to say is this: even our own creativity is just an outflow of his.
And so I'll end with this. You know that quote about giving credit where it's due? Well, if that's true, then it's about time we give God the credit too. Because the truth is, he's not through with making a masterpiece out of you. Now's the time to stand between the living and the dead. Let's turn it up.